Well, it's October, friends, and time for a new unit. Can you guess what we might be learning about? Pumpkins! There are pumpkins everywhere! That's right. We are beginning our pumpkin unit today with the story Pumpkin, Pumpkin. It's this beautiful book. Let me show it to you. And it is written by Jean Titherington. And it is so gorgeously illustrated, friends. I'm really excited to show it to you. It goes through describing Jamie's adventure in growing this pumpkin, and we get to see how the pumpkin goes through its life cycle. So we're going to read this first together, and then we are going to make a timeline of events to see how the pumpkin grows. So let's start with Pumpkin, Pumpkin. It is dedicated for James and the fish. Jamie planted a pumpkin seed. And the pumpkin seed grew a pumpkin sprout. And the pumpkin sprout grew a pumpkin plant. Friends, you'll notice some sweet animals that make an appearance in this book. See if you can find the animals in the illustrations, because in our next lesson, we're going to be writing some sentences about those animals. So that's just a little hint, sneak peek. Okay, so the pumpkin sprout grew a pumpkin plant. And the pumpkin plant grew a pumpkin flower. And the pumpkin flower grew a pumpkin. And the pumpkin grew and grew and grew until Jamie picked it. Then Jamie scooped out the pumpkin pulp, carved a pumpkin face, and put it in the window. But he saved 6 pumpkin seeds for planting in the spring. Wow, friends, that was a beautiful book. We got to see how Jamie first planted the pumpkin seed, and then that seed grew a sprout, and that sprout grew a plant, and that plant grew a flower, and that flower grew a pumpkin. It started out green, but then it grew bigger and bigger and bigger, and it turned into a big orange pumpkin. That's right, friends. Now we're going to make a timeline of the most important events of our story. So a timeline shows, here's a sneak peek of our timeline. A timeline shows in a series of events in order. So we're thinking, what happened first? What happened second? What happened third? What happened last? We start here at the beginning of the timeline and keep going as we put events. So we need to know what happened first. What did Jamie do first in the story? Well, let me see. I'm going to grab the book and see, what did Jamie do first? It says Jamie planted a pumpkin seed. So that is at the beginning of our timeline. Then remember how we saw how the pumpkin seed grew a sprout, and then that grew a flower, the plant grew a flower, and that flower grew a pumpkin. So that pumpkin was growing and growing from a tiny seed to a sprout to a flower to a pumpkin. So Jamie planted the pumpkin seed. The pumpkin grew and grew and grew until what? After the pumpkin was all grown, what did Jamie do? Let's check our story to see. it. That's right. Next, Jamie picked the pumpkin. And do you remember what he did with the pumpkin, friends? Do you remember? He carved a jack-o'-lantern. He made a face in the pumpkin. So the last event on our timeline was that Jamie carved a jack-o'-lantern. And we didn't put this in our sequence, but also at the very end, remember, he also saved some seeds to plant next time. But these are the most important main events of our timeline. Jamie planted a pumpkin seed, the pumpkin grew and grew, Jamie picked the pumpkin, and then Jamie carved a jack-o'-lantern. Friends, I'm excited to see you for our next lesson when we're going to make a song about our timeline, and we're going to read a little bit about the animals. We're going to write about the animals in our story. There's a sneak peek of our animal composition. So we will see you next time for our pumpkin lesson. Bye-bye.